just after 2 o'clock. See, a lot of people have already joined us. So we're maybe going to get started there because we got a lot to cover today. So I don't want to run too overlong. All right. So just to begin, anybody who's joined us, I do just want to ask that you close your microphone and video, if at all possible, just so it will help us stabilize the connection for everyone. I may do the same depending on if there are any issues. But yes, otherwise, we'll get started. So I'd like to welcome everyone today to this session, which is entitled Moving Forward Beyond COVID-19. It's an introduction to provincial arts funding and grant writing assistance. My name is Nick Maturo. I'm a research coordinator with ELAN. I've been working on the Quebec Relations project for about a year now, and I'm going to be leading the webinar today. And I'm also going to be joined by Guy Rogers, who is ELAN's executive director and also the project manager on Quebec Relations, as well as June Park. June is our grant writing advisor, and she's going to be telling you a bit about some exciting services that we have to offer through the program to help you with your grant writing. So I will just get started then. A brief note to begin with, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the reason that we're here virtually today over Zoom instead of all together in the same room. Obviously, COVID-19 is affecting all of us, causing a great deal of stress, uncertainty, and disruption. And certainly it's affecting the arts and culture community in all kinds of significant ways. But these kinds of situations do provide us with the opportunity to build and support community in new and important ways. And these Zoom sessions will be one way of doing so. I know here at ELAN, we're going to try and do more of these moving forward to stay connected with the community and try and support you as much as possible. I also encourage you to consult ELAN's COVID-19 resource page on our website. We've got a lot of important resources on there from things like federal emergency funding, how to apply for CERB, all the way down to, you know, you're feeling a bit cooped up at home, how can you pass the time and, you know, keep morale high? So there's a good wide range of stuff. I encourage you to check it out. And lastly, yeah, just one last note. I ask that you keep your microphones muted and your video off during the session, both to minimize distraction for fellow participants and just to keep the connection stable. So this is the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be offering through Quebec Relations. This one is an introductory session. So it's going to be a way for you to learn a bit more about the project, and we can share what resources we have available to help you and give you a few tips on getting started. So I'm sure you all come from a range of backgrounds with different experience levels, and that's great. That's perfect. We think this webinar and the resources that we can provide offer something to everyone. This is also going to serve as a prelude to set the stage for some of the more directed and specific sessions that we're going to have in the future. So those will resolve around specific topics or be about discipline-specific funding. So more on that later. We'll be sending out emails in the coming weeks. You should already be on our email list, but if for some reason you feel that that's not the case, I'm going to post my email at the end of the presentation. Feel free to just send me an email and I'll make sure you're on the list and you get all our updates. And lastly, before moving on, I just want to say that we welcome your feedback in all of this. We really want to be responsive to the community's needs, provide you with the sort of the support and resources that you need. So any and all feedback moving forward, we really do appreciate to help fine tune these and make them as impactful as we can. So I will just offer a quick outline of how we're going to proceed for the rest of our hour or so together. First, I'm going to invite Guy Rogers to provide a bit of background on Quebec Relations, since perhaps I think some of you are maybe a little bit more familiar with the work we've done on the project, others less so. So Guy is just going to bring us all up to speed, tell us where the program or the project comes from. So then I'll speak a bit briefly about the actual tangible research that I've done on the project. So in terms of researching different provincial funding programs and also consulting with the community. Then we're going to move on to sort of the meat and potatoes of the session, talking about provincial funding, how we can simplify your task of finding relevant grants. I'm going to provide a few examples of useful programs you can look at to get started. And then I'm going to tell you how we can make it easier for you to actually apply to these programs. I'll explain a little bit about the one-on-one funding consultations that we're doing. And then we'll talk a bit about the grant writing and editing assistance that is available through June Park. June is our grant advisor who is consulting with us on the project. She'll be able to tell you a little bit more about that later on. And lastly, we're going to close off with a question period in the time remaining. So we ask that to keep things simple, you just type your questions into the chat window. We'll follow those, and in the time remaining at the end, we'll get through as many of those as we can. Of course, if we don't get around to you, my email will be posted. I'm happy to answer any questions via email afterwards. So we have a lot to cover. I'm going to try to move through this at a decent pace without speeding through it, but please do let me know in the chat window if I'm moving too quickly. I will do my best to throw the brakes on. So with that said, I will hand things over to Guy to tell us a little bit more about Quebec Relations.
Good, thank you, Nick. That was a good introduction. Good to see some familiar names and faces, plus a few new folks. You would have noticed earlier on at the bottom right-hand screen that this is funded by the Secretariat for Relations with English-speaking Quebecers. The Secretariat was created in the last year of the previous provincial Liberal government, and it's something the English-speaking community has been requesting for many years. A way to have better access to Quebec government ministries and a way to resolve problems and find answers to questions. We know that artists feel much closer to the Canada Council for the Arts and the Montreal Arts Council or their local municipal councils than they do to CALQ, and that people feel closer to CALQ than they do to SODEC or the Ministry of Culture. And once you start getting into all of the other provincial ministries, people often have no idea what to apply for or how to apply. So this program is funded by the Quebec government for the English-speaking arts community to make a listing of all of the grants available. Nick's going to be talking about that for organizations because most individual artists are funded through CALQ, and we have separate information sessions for CALQ. And we're going to encourage all of you to be writing new grant applications. Where possible, we're going to assist you. Nick can assist you, I can assist you, but June in particular will be able to assist you with your grant applications. And we want to monitor the results because we know sometimes in the past there have been problems with people receiving funding, either because they didn't understand program parameters or because there was some sort of a problem with the way Anglophone applications were processed. So we want to really monitor that to make sure that applications are being fairly responded to. This is a 2-year project. We're in year 2. We have funding until March 31st, 2021. So I'm really going to be encouraging everybody in the English language art scene in Quebec to be availing themselves of the information and the support and the assistance of this program while we have these resources, because who knows when we will ever have them again. So thank you, Nick, for presenting this program, and I'm sure everybody will be interested in hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guy. Okay, so we're going to move on from there, and I'll tell you a little bit, now that you have the background, I'll tell you a bit about some of our tangible activities and the goals of the project. So simply put, the goals are to try to identify all the available funding sources that are available within the provincial government, cast as wide a net as possible to see what's out there, and then to help English-speaking arts organizations actually apply for that new funding. So what does that look like? In terms of our research, tried to search high and low to see, anything and everything that could possibly be of use to an arts organization. Obviously, this has led us through sort of the places you might expect. So beginning with CALQ, the Conseil des Arts et Lettres du Québec. So I have a feeling this is probably the funding body that most of you would be more likely to be familiar with already. CALQ serves individual artists, collectives, but also not-for-profit organizations, which we've been looking at specifically. But then there is also SODEC. SODEC serves more for-profit businesses and industry, so for things like film and television, the music and recording industry, publishing, as well as sort of arts and crafts. And then lastly, out of the three, there is the Ministry of Culture and Communications. And if you were to look at their program documentation, it tends to be a little bit more opaque. You might not necessarily know what is it that they specialize in compared to CALQ or SODEC. Generally, they tend to fund arts and culture projects with more of a social or community kind of impact, rather than really be judging applications solely on artistic merit. They also fund sort of higher level projects and activities, including festivals. And we don't have a ton of data on applicant success rates for Ministry of Culture programs. But there are some interesting programs being offered, and they do seem to have significant resources available to them. So if these seems like the kind of things that might be of use to you, we encourage you to look into that, and I'm certainly happy to help you do that along the way. But of course, we've also wanted to look beyond just the usual arts and culture funding to some of the places that you might not necessarily think to look, but could still be very helpful. So some of the places that we've looked at have included Emploi Québec, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Tourism. We've also looked at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and et cetera. We've had a few more added to that list. So obviously the relevance of these programs will be more limited since they're not sort of widely intended for arts and culture applicants. But depending on your specific context, there may be something that is of use to you that could be perfectly responsive to your situation or a project that you're working on, which makes it all the more important to actually look and see what's out there, because you never know what's available to you until you actually have a look. So how have we actually gone about trying to share this information with people? Well, we've produced documents that we are calling one sheets. So simply put, these are 1 to 2 page summary documents of all the important information translated into English. That's an important note because a lot of these programs, the documentation is available only in French. And yeah, so for over 130 different programs, we're providing you with all the information that you need. So that's the eligibility criteria, the amounts of funding that are offered, the duration of the funding, and other information like that. We're also providing contact information so you can get in touch with the funders directly. And this is important to note because this is something that came up with talking with more experienced grant applicants. They really stress that it's important to reach out and get in touch with program officers directly, both to build a rapport, but also to be able to ask your questions. Sometimes the eligibility criteria, we try to make it as straightforward as possible, but it still might be a little uncertain for you. So what better way to find out for sure than to just, reach out and ask. That's what those people are there for. They'll be able to help you. So the other half of our activities have been actually consulting with the community through doing surveys and focus groups. So we have spoken with a number of organizations in the community. We sent out our survey to over 260 organizations to learn a bit more about their funding needs. So we're asking them things like whether they already have provincial funding, what areas of their operations are sort of the most important and most in need of additional funding. And based on that research, we've been able to sort of draw some broad inferences on that data. which has allowed us to then try and dial in a bit more through focus groups. So we did a number of focus groups last fall with a handful of selected survey respondents to try and learn a bit more about their funding needs. So to ask them more specific questions, hear about their experiences in trying to access funding, both positive and less positive. And we've also asked for a bit of feedback on the one-sheet documents that we've prepared, just to get a sense of how useful they are, whether we're going about this the right way. And I'm happy to say that feedback was generally very positive. So we think this information could really be of use to people. So speaking of actually sharing that information, we decided to go beyond just offering these one-sheet documents, keeping them on the ELAN server and then sharing them as needed. We wanted to make them as accessible, simple to use, and streamlined as possible. So I'm happy to say that as of March, we launched our new searchable funding platform on the ELAN website. You can see a little screen capture in front of you here. The URL is funding.quebec-elan.org. And so that contains all of the information for those 130 plus programs I just talked about. Rather than just show you static pictures and try to describe the website for you, I'm going to go back into my screen share. Yes, there we are. I'm going to leave my presentation and I'm going to actually go to our funding website. So you can see it there. When you type in the URL, this is the landing page. And it provides you with a number of search criteria right at the top. So you can enter in all of the information that matches your organization's profile and be provided with all of the most relevant programs to you. So we've got options like your artistic discipline. See, we have a wide range here. Who a program is available to, so whether it's a not-for-profit organization, a for-profit company, or anything in between. What region of Quebec a program is open to. Most of these programs are open to all regions, but there are a few that are region specific. So depending on where you're located, it's worth having a look, because there might be something intended specifically for you. And then if you go over here and you click the More Options text, you get a second row of options. You can narrow your search results down by funder. Say, in advance, I only want to look for SODEC programs. You can just click that and you're on your way. There is the amount of financial aid offered. I have a feeling the 75 to 100% category is going to be the most popular one, but say you only need a little bit of funding, you can check these other options. We have the duration of funding, whether that's for a whole year or maybe just a couple of events, you can select accordingly. And lastly, the type of aid available. So whether that's a grant, a loan, or another category of sort of miscellaneous options. So I'll show you an example here. Say we want to search for grants that are available to literature, for not-for-profit organizations located in Montreal. We just click search. And you can see we have 8 results that are specifically relevant right off the bat. And so you would just scroll down and your search results come up here with sort of all of the salient info at a glance that you would want to look at. Who's offering it, what kind of program, how much, etc. So you would scroll through all of those, but I will actually go into one of these and show you what an actual program page looks like. So this is offered through CALQ. We have the grant title at the top in English. We have the original French title under here because, again, this is all translated. And then just below, we have a row of sort of the most important information at a glance. You can look at and see, is this program of interest to me? Just below that, we have a quick description of what it is that the program does or who it's available to. We have contact information for a program officer. As much as possible, we try to make it a specific individual that you can contact, although in some cases it is just sort of a general inbox. And then beneath that, we have all of the eligibility criteria. Who can apply, what specific criteria there is, what expenses are covered, any documents that you need to send along with your application. And then along the right side, you can see all of the regions that are available and the fields that are available. So each of these 130 plus programs has its own page like this, trying to make it a manageable amount of information for you, not go into too much detail, but give you what you need to apply. I will just go back to the main funding page just to say that while you can search to speed things up, as soon as you load the page, all 130 plus are just going to be below that main search box here. So if you want to just scroll through, maybe out of curiosity, see what's available, you can just do that. You see, we have the CALQ ones at the top. Go a bit further down. We have the Ministry of Culture here. Still further down, we have some programs offered by SODEC, etc. You get the idea. So you've seen a bit about the funding site. I'll just return to the presentation. So you've seen the funding website. You're thinking, okay, there are over 130 programs that I could apply to. Great. Where do I begin? For some of you, maybe you have some idea. For others, maybe 130 is a bit overwhelming. That's not an issue. I'm going to offer now just a couple of quick examples to maybe get you started, get you thinking about what kind of programs might be of benefit to you, what you want to look into. So first, we have this program called Publication, which is offered by CALQ. I'm highlighting this one particularly because considering all the uncertainty around COVID-19 and actual in-person presentation of works, this is a program through CALQ that supports the dissemination of works in print or in recorded media. So the goal here is basically just to document and disseminate an artist's work. It's open to fields including visual arts, arts and crafts, architectural research, digital arts, as well as film and video. It covers 75% of your project's expenses with no maximum. And there is a rolling deadline, so you can apply at any time during the year. Although I will note that CALQ suggests for most of their programs with a rolling deadline that you apply at least 3 months in advance before the start of your project. So if you want to get started with a grant about how you can share your work without having to be necessarily in person, this is a great one to get started with. The next example that I've selected is through CALQ called Specific Programming. So despite the uncertainty surrounding COVID-19, it is important to at least start planning for future performances so that when things return to some kind of normalcy or we get a better idea of a time frame, you're able to hit the ground running. So this particular program supports a variety of different programming during a given period of time, including activities to develop audiences and raise audience awareness, marketing activities, as well as presentation of works and live performances. So this one is actually available to all disciplines, including the performing arts. Like the previous program, it covers 75% of project expenses with no maximum amount. And again, there is a rolling deadline. You can apply throughout the year. And the last example that I've selected is one of our program that is available through one of the non-arts funders. And it's through Emploi Quebec, and it offers wage subsidies for employees. So I'm sure some of you have already taken advantage of Emploi Quebec's programs. One thing that came up a lot in surveys was the limited capacity of small arts organizations that, have to do more with less. But still, people talked about the need to be able to add extra employees to focus on a number of areas. One of the ones that came up the most was actually social media, helping out with social media. And this is something that ELAN has actually made use of with Emploi Québec's programs in the past, brought in people to help with our communications and social media, and it's been a really positive experience. The great thing about this is that full-time positions are eligible. They are covered by this. The actual amount covered varies depending on the nature of the position you're applying for, as well as the amount of support that that position necessitates within your organization. And just a note on Emploi Québec, we do intend to offer a future webinar specifically about Emploi Québec's programs, just to help you make sense of what's available, get a better understanding of the process. We'd also like to share some positive experiences from members of the community who've made use of their programs and have used them effectively. So if you're in the session today and that applies to you, you've used Emploi Québec and had a really good go of it, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email to maybe share your experience and any tips and tricks you might have for other people who want to apply. I think it would be great to start sharing that information so everybody knows how best to access these programs. So yeah, these are 3 programs just to get you started, or at least get you thinking. I haven't gone into the programs offered by SODEC here, just because based on the profiles of most of our participants today, they tend to lean more towards applying for CALQ. But if you're running a for-profit organization or you're interested in SODEC's programs, I encourage you to contact me directly so we can discuss that further. I can provide a bit more background information and maybe get you started on a few programs to look at. And obviously, there's also so many other programs that are non-art specific that we've looked at that have a more limited scope, but could conceivably be perfect for you, which is why it's important to either consult the funding website or to contact me for a bit of sort of personalized assistance, which does lead me into the next part of our presentation, which is, how can Quebec Relations actually help you beyond just saying, here's a website, check it out, What resources do we actually have to help you in a personalized way? So the resources that we're offering are really result from like a two-part approach to understanding how to apply for funding. Bear with me, my cat is walking over my notes right now. Occam's razor of a Zoom presentation. My cat will make an appearance at some point. So basically, yeah, the resources we're offering are based on a two-part understanding of how to apply for funding. So first, it's a question of how do you identify the programs that are relevant to you? So that's a question of understanding the criteria, and then also understanding what kind of projects the program is looking for. So then you can, tailor your application to be able to give them the information and present it in such a way that it responds to what they're looking for. The second part of this process, of course, is the more daunting part, which is actually preparing a successful application. Fortunately, we can make both of these a little more convenient and painless for you. So the first part of that process entails individual one-on-one consultations. So one thing our surveys show is that regardless of people's experience level, researching grants can be a bit of an issue. So this might be a question of lacking experience and not knowing where to start, being a bit intimidated about the process. All of that is totally understandable. But it could just as easily be a matter of, you're an experienced grant writer, you've done this before, but you're juggling so many things with your organization that you really just don't have the time to do the research beyond what you are already aware of. So basically, I'm able to do that research for you. Through our one-on-one consultations, We can set up a Zoom or a phone call, which basically allows us to have a discussion so I can learn a bit more about your situation, what it is that your organization does, and any individual funding needs that you might have. Say you have a new project or performance coming up that you want to be able to fund specifically. I can learn about that, and then basically what I can do is go and do a bit of research for you and get back to you in a fairly quick turnaround, depending on the volume of requests, of course. I can get back to you with a list of relevant options. We can then discuss those options, and basically I can refine them based on your feedback. So maybe you think some options are a little more what you were looking for, some less so. Maybe some of what I've suggested makes you think about other things that you hadn't even considered that might be relevant to you. We can do a sort of a back and forth process, and I can make sure you get what you need. And then, of course, the second part of this process is actually applying for funding. So you've got a couple of grants that I've suggested. What comes next? Obviously, identifying grants is only half the battle. And that's whether you're a first-time applicant and don't really know where to start, or you're an experienced grant writer and you're just short on time. You're looking for some help fine-tuning. You want another set of eyes to look over what you've done. We can provide you with subsidized grant writing and editing assistance to really make sure you put your best foot forward. So that's whether you decide you need some help after we've had an individual consultation, or maybe right at this moment, you're thinking, I know exactly the grant that I want to apply for, but I need a bit of help getting started. All you have to do is reach out to me. I can understand a bit more about your situation, make sure that we are actually able to help you. And then I am able to refer you to June Park, who is one of our grant writing advisors that is working with us on Quebec Relations. So at this point, I'm going to invite June to say a few words sort of about her process, about her background, and how she can help you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, I'm just gonna say hi for 2 seconds visually, and then I'm gonna turn off my camera just because I find that I've been having some issues with the video today. But thanks so much. I think all the work that Nick has done in this this amazing amount of information he's gathered is so useful, and I hope that people are really able to take advantage of it and to share the knowledge to let anybody else in the arts who might need this kind of help know, because I think it's really invaluable. I'm a consultant for artists and arts organizations. I've taught grant writing workshops for ELAN before and given many one-on-one consultations. Over 20 years of arts experience, hundreds of grants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it boils down to the fact that I think I'm able to hopefully help whoever might need a bit of extra assistance. But I'd like to remind everybody that the first step for anyone interested is to contact Nick directly, because he really will be able to assess your situation and needs and direct you to the proper resource, whether or not that happens to be me or some other organization, or maybe a totally different grant than you were thinking of. I'm here as a resource to help evaluate projects and make sure that the applications that are set to go in are articulated in the strongest way possible. And this can happen at any point in the grant writing process as well, as Nick has already mentioned, from pre-application to the final draft, right to the minute of submission, depending on how much help you need. So basically what I try to look at is making sure the articulation of the artistic vision is as clear and as compelling as possible. We look at the feasibility, making sure that you're answering everything in a way that the grant funders, that the funding bodies, see that your project is feasible and it has legs to stand on things like the budget and the supporting materials. And then ultimately just making sure that it is as strong as possible. I always call myself a grant advisor instead of a grant writer, because I do believe that the content of any grant, the core of the grant, needs to come from the artist or the arts organization. And then my job is to make sure that that content is as clear, concise, and compelling as possible. So ultimately, I think what ELAN would like to do, and what I always like to do, is to enable artists and organizations to themselves learn how to look at a grant in a way that they know that they're answering the questions in the way that the funding body wants to hear the answers, and to write those better grants independently on an ongoing basis so that we can see continued results. I think that's it for what I need to say. I would like to remind everybody, and this is something to be shared, because I've had some organizations and some artists say, oh, well, I'm not going to apply for that grant just yet because of the current COVID situation. And I think that's a mistake. All of the granting bodies are open and waiting for applications. It's always a good time to apply. And I encourage people to keep doing that and to anticipate the best situation possible and to write the grants with that in mind. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, June. Yeah, so just to reiterate, we really have a terrific resource available here to you, both through our consultations and being able to refer you to June Park. I think these are really great resources, a super good way to get started regardless of your experience level. We're really here to help and try to simplify the process for you, because it can sometimes be intimidating and difficult to know where exactly to begin. So I just want to reiterate, all you have to do is get in touch and we can get started. So I believe we're making good time here. I believe this brings us to the end of the actual presentation. So I'm going to put up my email here just in case anybody needs it. And so, yeah, we're going to move on to the question and answer period in the time that we have remaining. If you haven't already, please send your questions in the chat window. And yeah, you're also strongly encouraged to get in touch via email with any questions you may have. If you think of something after the session or over the weekend, please do get in touch.